We are now going to cover the insect and mite pests that attack ornamental plants, trees, shrubs, and perennials. There's an incredible array of these pests, but we can arrange them in several ways. This class is what I call content-rich, which means that there will be many terms that are used to describe and classify the pests that attack ornamental plants. Fortunately, many of the terms are pretty self-explanatory, but others may need you to review them. There are several ways to cover the insects and mites that attack ornamental plants. Entomologists often like to go through the groups taxonomically, that is, by each order and family. But this isn't the way that anyone detects these pests in the field. Most pests are detected on the portion of a plant that they are attacking, and some books group the pests as foliage eaters or feeders, stem and branch attackers, trunk inhabitants, and root feeders. Chewing and sucking mouthparts typically cause characteristic and often diagnostic signs and symptoms, and some books use this approach to group the pests. I have already mentioned that there are over 30 orders of insects, but only a limited number of these are important to this course. The most important orders are the Hemiptera, which includes a large variety of bugs and bug-like insects. In fact, we will probably have to cover most of these by taxonomic families, as their sucking damage is very similar, but their life cycles are very different. The Coleoptera, or beetles, and weevils have adults and larvae that damage plants. The Hymenoptera can be doubly important. The sawfly group feeds on plant foliage, and some can burrow into trunks. However, the vast majority of the Hymenoptera species are beneficial parasitoids or pollinators, though some cause plant galls. The Lepidoptera includes the butterflies and moths, which have caterpillar larvae that usually feed on plant foliage, but some burrow into the plants. The Diptera include the midges and flies. Some midges cause galls, and a small group of flies mine the leaves of many kinds of plants. In this course, we'll cover most of these orders by considering the part of the plant attacked and the nature of the damage. Your textbook for this course divides up the insect and mite pests according to the plant part attacked. This works pretty well, except one has to repeat several insect groups for pests like aphids. There are species of aphids that attack leaves, some feed on the bark, and a few feed on roots. In this arrangement, the chewing and sucking pests are intermingled with each category. Notice that I'm also introducing the concept of nuisance pests. These can be insects and mites that don't actually damage a plant, but can be considered nuisances by humans. A wasp nest in a shrub can be environmentally beneficial, but the property owner usually doesn't like the risk of stings. Brown marmorated stink bug damage is usually unnoticed in plants, but their home invasions are unwelcomed. I prefer kind of a hybrid of the parts of the plant attacked and the feeding type. In short, there are chewing pests that eat the foliage, mine the foliage, burrow in the trunk or stems, or eat the roots. Other insects and mites suck juices in characteristic ways, and this is often related to the taxonomic groups. In other words, true bugs, aphids, scales, mites, etc. We also have to pay attention to the special group of insects and mites that force plants to make galls in which the pests live and or obtain their food. And, as just discussed, we have the nuisance pests that are using ornamental plants for food or habitat, but don't really damage the plants. Let's take a closer look at some of these categories. Foliage-eating pests includes a wide variety of beetle adults and larvae, caterpillars, and sawfly larvae. When these pests eat entire plants or most of a leaf, we call them general feeders, and if they strip all of the foliage, they would be called defoliators. Many beetles and small caterpillar larvae eat the surface layers of a leaf, yet leave behind the veins of the opposite leaf layer. These are called skeletonizers. Many weevils are notorious for feeding along the margin of host plants, which produces a notched edge. Still other insects, mainly caterpillars and some sawfly larvae, roll, fold, or tie together leaves of their host plants in which the larvae feeds. Others make cases or web over the foliage of their host plants. Here are some examples of foliage-eating pests. The walnut caterpillars have eaten almost all the leaves off of this branch. While this looks aesthetically displeasing, it really does little damage to affect the long-term health of the plant, especially when such defoliation only occurs on limited parts of a host plant or irregularly from year to year. Likewise, the small amount of skeletonization of a tree's leaves is considered to be a minor problem. Bagworms can defoliate conifer branches, and because conifers can only leaf out and set buds once per year, infestations can result in dead branches and even entire trees. On the other hand, bagworms on a deciduous tree cause little damage. In summary, most foliage-eating pests cause aesthetic damage, but they rarely put the plant at risk of dying. Leafminers are a rather strange group of plant foliage eaters. All are the larvae of flies, moths, sawflies, or beetles. The larvae of these pests are very small and flat. They can feed on the spongy parenchyma found between the upper and lower epidermis of a plant leaf. This can leave behind a characteristic mine that is often unique for each species or group. Most leaf mining is cosmetic and poses little risk to the long-term health of the infested plant. However, there are a few cases where leaf miners can cause significant leaf drop of affected plant parts, and annual attacks can eventually affect the plant health. Leaf miners can produce visual damage that can be pretty alarming to the plant owners, but in most cases the damage is merely cosmetic and poses little risk to the long-term health of the host plant. In a few cases, very susceptible cultivars of plants can be attacked year after year, and management is required to maintain the plant's health as well as aesthetic appearance. Borers are usually the larvae of beetles and moths. Borers are also one of the groups generally considered to be key pests, as their feeding damage can girdle their host plants or make their hosts more susceptible to breakage during wind or ice storms. Obviously, the beetle larvae and caterpillars that feed in the cambium area of a plant are the ones that can cause sudden death of the plant when girdling of the branch, stem, or trunk occurs. Because these pests are inside the plant, management can be extremely difficult, especially after an infestation has already occurred. Many borers can only successfully attack stress trees that don't have sufficient sap to cast out any invaders. On the other hand, there are some borers that attack perfectly healthy trees. White pine weevil females actually chew holes into the bark of conifer leaders to cut off the sap flow. They then lay eggs at the tip of the leader, and their larvae can successfully burrow down the stem, which kills the top of the tree. In the case of the emerald ash borer, native ash trees have no defenses against this borer, so the massive attacks by larvae quickly girdle North American ash trees, thereby killing them. Another difficult group of pests to deal with are the ones that attack ornamental plant roots. The problem with these pests is that the damage is not visible, and the only symptom seen is slow growth of the plants, rapid wilting in the summer sun, or even plant death. In some cases, the larvae of scarab beetles, called white grubs, and some weevil larvae are the most common culprits. However, we occasionally find wireworm and soil-inhabiting caterpillars doing damage to plant roots. Root-eating pests are rarely detected unless plants are dug up for transplanting. Nursery producers are often more aware of these pests as white grubs, like the Japanese beetle grubs, are quarantine pests. State plant inspectors often look and detect these pests in the soil around plants and then issue a quarantine notice until the pests are controlled. Black vine weevils can also build up in nurseries where they kill or slow the growth of shrubs and perennials. These can even occur in containerized plants where inspectors often detect them. These soil-inhabiting pests can be very difficult to manage because of their locations. We will take considerable time to cover the various sucking insects. Most of these will be covered taxonomically, as each family of true bugs and bug-like insects have very different life histories and feeding habits. All can cause distortion of expanding plant tissues, and many cause significant aesthetic damage due to the discoloration caused by chlorophyll removal or production of feces like tar spots and honeydew. Technically, mites don't actually have sucking mouthparts, but their tiny chelicerate mouthparts are used to remove cell contents of plants, which can resemble sucking insect damage. While most sucking insect pests are considered to be aesthetic pests by entomologists, the visual damage is largely unacceptable to the plant owners. Discolored and distorted leaves can make plants look really bad in a landscape. Many of these pests are best controlled with preventive programs, and others require considerable knowledge of biological controls, which can be really effective if properly managed. Unfortunately, when cover sprays of insecticides are used, the insecticides also kill off these biological controls. Gall-forming pests are really fascinating. Mites and insects with sucking mouthparts need a way to escape their gall homes. These types of galls have a slit or opening and are called open galls. However, beetle larvae, caterpillars, wasp larvae, and even some fly larvae can chew holes through the gall tissues in order to emerge. Such galls are called closed galls. Galls are basically distorted plant growths in which the gall maker lives and feeds. We also have to be aware that there are diseases that can also produce abnormal growths that look like insect and mite galls. Most galls are considered to be aesthetic pests. Most attack plant leaves or stems, and damage rarely causes any major long-term health problems for the infested plants. Only a few galls, like the gouty oak gall and the hornbeak galls on oaks, can severely stunt the growth of a plant. We have to acknowledge that many people do not differentiate between pests that are actually feeding on or damaging ornamental plants and insects that are using the ornamental plants for nesting. The Asian multicolored lady beetle often will feed on aphids and other soft-bodied insects that are in trees and shrubs. However, the adult beetles have a nasty habit of biting human skin if the beetles land on a person. And the adults often invade homes in the fall to find overwintering locations. Ants often feed on aphid honeydew, and when the aphids disappear, the aphids forage inside the nearby house looking for sweets. Many aphids build their nests in trees and shrubs, and the potential of them stinging is often overblown. Spiders are beneficial predators, but unwelcome inside of homes. Landscape managers need to have knowledge of nuisance pests and the law that many states have concerning their management. In short, If you are controlling boxelder bugs on a silver maple to stop damage to the silver maple, an ornamental plant license is proper. However, if you are trying to keep the boxelder bugs from getting into a home, you need a household structural pesticide license. Because of this, many landscape managers either don't control nuisance pests or they have to obtain the household structural pest license to better serve their customers.